Hello, everybody. We're going to get started here in a minute or so. Thanks for joining today. All right, I see we have a lot of people filtering in here, joining us. So let's go ahead and kick it off. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our town hall, Ergonomics in Action, Expert Insights on Categorization and Recording of Work-Related MSDs. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Katie McCory, Senior Program Manager with the National Safety Council's MSD Solutions Lab. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We have a fantastic presentation and panel discussion lined up for you this afternoon. But before we dive into today's program, I wanted to share a few words about the MSD Solutions Lab. So those of you who are familiar know by now that MSDs aren't just one of the biggest safety challenges facing today's workers, they're also one of the biggest challenges facing today's employers. Not only do they take a physical and psychological toll on workers themselves as the second leading cause in shortening employees' working years, but MSDs are also costly. Each year, private businesses in the US lose nearly $18 billion in lost wages and medical expenses due to these injuries, according to the 2024 Liberty Mutual Workplace Safety Index. And it's for this reason that NSC, with funding and support from Amazon, has been so focused on addressing this widespread safety challenge the past couple of years. Our mission at the lab is simple. We want to eliminate MSDs from workplaces worldwide so workers can spend more time doing the things they love with the people they love. We are already making tremendous progress by engaging key stakeholders, conducting research, identifying new technology, innovating solutions, and scaling the results so all workplaces can benefit. And in fact, through our Hallmark MSD Pledge Program, over 230 of the world's leading organizations, representing nearly 3 million employees, have joined us on this journey to transform workplace safety. And if your organization is not yet a member of the MSD Pledge community, we encourage you to join us. Becoming a Pledge member gets you access to a lot of ways to engage with the lab and also better your ergonomics and MSD prevention efforts. A few of our exclusive offerings for MSD Pledge members include our pilot grant program, which provides pledgees an opportunity to partner with solution providers to pilot emerging technologies for MSD risk mitigation. The MSD Solutions Index, which is an annual survey developed by the lab that assesses the maturity of an organization's MSD prevention initiatives. Quarterly benchmarking events that bring safety professionals from the Pledge community and other NSC members together to discuss prominent topics related to MSD prevention. And lastly, Ask the Experts office hours, which are monthly informal meetings for all MSD Pledge members to attend to ask questions of the MSD Solutions Lab team. So if you're not a pledgee already, please take a moment to check out the link that my colleague Riley is going to drop in the chat. You can learn more, and you can also access the MSD Pledge through that link. Now, switching gears a bit here, let's discuss the rest of today's agenda. First, we're going to hear from Dr. Ram Mekala, Program Technical Consultant with the National Safety Council's MSD Solutions Lab. He will be providing a brief presentation on MSD injury surveillance. Next, we will introduce our industry experts and jump into a moderated discussion in which our panelists will answer questions and explore best practices, practical strategies, and real-world examples related to navigating the complexities of ergonomic injury documentation. And lastly, we will end our program with a few closing remarks. Before tossing it over to Ram for his presentations, we just wanted to put up a quick disclaimer here. As a quick reminder, this event is supported by Amazon, but the contents and results reflect the speakers' contributions and are solely their responsibility and do not necessarily represent the views of Amazon or official position of the National Safety Council. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ram, and he'll take it away.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Katie, for your introduction. And I just want to, again, thank you for all the, the work we have been doing with the support, excellent support from Amazon. So I'm going to talk about the importance of musculoskeletal disorders and related injury surveillance. This is a research insight or a white paper which we did recently. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. But after that, I'm going to bring the expert panel, and then we'll have some discussions with respect to not only the way they defined MSDs, but also their injury surveillance approaches with respect to their own industries. Okay. Next slide, please. So it's not that you guys don't know, but MSDs or injuries, basically, if you look at the NIOSH or CDC, they are the injuries or disorders of the muscles, nerves, tendons, joints, and the cartilage and spinal discs. They are caused by a sudden or a sustained force. It can be a repetitive motion, or it can be due to awkward postures or even vibration. And again, it's not the result of any instantaneous non-exertion event like slips, trips, and falls. Okay. And obviously, they are work related in the sense that, the work environment and the performance of work contribute significantly to this particular condition. And of course, conditions can be made worse or persist longer due to work-related factors. That's, classic definition, and majority of us use it, right? So if you're looking at the data, right? So if you're looking at the data, especially the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there was a definition which was a bit, pre-20, 2010 versus, from 2011, the definitions have changed with respect to BLS. So from 2011, the definition of MSD is, often they call as ergonomic injuries. I know some people might not like that word ergonomic injuries per se, but, they are basically the cases with the nature of injury or illness that leads to, it can be nerve related, pinched nerves, carpal tunnel syndrome, spinal issues, and also joint and soft issues, sprains, strains, and tears. That's what the tears would come under. And you have symptoms and syndromes. The reason I put those red is that, BLS used to consider these red ones non-MSDs until 2010. Okay, so they changed that. Now you have this tarsal submental tunnel syndrome with respect to lower extremities. You have herniated disc, with the spinal related issues, and of course this, the hand-arm vibration, the syndrome due to hand-arm vibration. So these are the ones which now are part of the definition of MSDs. Okay. And of course, these conditions are classified as MSDs because when they result from the workplace events or exposures. So it can be overexertions or bodily reactions. Unspecified means you don't know the cause, but it was an overexertion or the nature. It can be overexertion involving outside sources being you lifting something, pushing, pulling, all the, tasks. And you have repetitive motion involving micro tasks as well, and obviously any other exertions or bodily reactions with respect to that particular work. And the vibration related injuries as well. So you have these various definitions when you are collecting the data and when you're putting this part of the MSD related injuries in your day-to-day work. Next slide, please. So the way typically the classification of these particular injuries is done by nature of injury or incident type. So the nature of injury, aligns with the ergonomics related risk factors, and that results in common MSDs, such as strain, low back pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, which you have seen in the previous slide. It can be criteria based on the incident type. It aligns with the work-related risk factors. You have these factors such as sudden or sustained force, posture, repetitions, and other tasks. So basically, the underlying cause of injury, refers to the factors that are triggered the events leading to an injury. What is it, a unsafe working condition or improper lifting technique or equipment failure? It explains why this particular injury occurred. So, for example, you have the nature of injuries: acute strain or sprain. The type can be force. If you're looking at a chronic strain, it can be an overexertion, cumulative. You have a repetitive motion, maybe leads to carpal tunnel syndrome. So these are the factors which we, typically, we have this, you can classify based on the nature of injury and incident type. Next slide, please. So, again, as I said, we'll discuss quite a few things in the triangle, so that's why I'm just going, very short. Yeah, but we know that, there is a huge amount of research which is looking at barriers for injury reporting. It's a lot of, industries still struggle with it, even at the national level, international level. There is a huge issue with, the barriers for injury reporting. For example, the major one, which we struggle with is lack of direct causation. Is it work? What is the work relatedness of this particular one? Because as you know, they develop gradually, MSDs. They may, so basically having tough, we struggle with direct causation. So workers are often exposed to risk factors, multiple risk factors. It can be work, worker, and environment. And these symptoms may not appear immediately. So that's the reason, lack of, again, the work relatedness can be a huge issue. Okay. And lack of workers' knowledge about these particular MSDs, that can be a problem too. And you have complexities in identifying the work relatedness. Yes, you can have a pre-existing medical condition, right? And also, workers with multiple jobs. You always have these, they can bring those injuries from the previous work they've been doing. Even in the, they have morning shift versus, different shift in the different workplace. You're working at home, you're taking care of certain things at home, and that can be aggravated. And then you come to work, that can be a factor too. So, and also, so the biggest problem is, how to differentiate between the work relatedness or the workplace related versus non-work related. That's a huge issue. That's why, some of the reporting issues happens. Of course, the occupational health providers role important too. That is, you need to have a provider who knows that, who knows how to accurately diagnose the work-related MSDs. Those providers can be in-house, off-site, external, but what I'm saying is that, their expertise is essential in properly attributing these MSDs to workplace exposure. The second one is underreporting. Again, this can be due to fear of retaliation or job loss, and you have pressure to maintain a low recordable injury rate. It can be an employer side too. The complexity of the reporting process. Some employers might not even know how to report an injury, and same thing with the employees as well. And you have incentive programs rewarding the absenteeism or injury rates. Lack of access to healthcare, that can be one of the factors to injury reporting as well. Again, knowledge how to report. Some workers can perceive those injuries are very minor. Maybe a distrust, in terms of the reporting. So of course, you have employer self-funded, insurances as well. They may be allowing the delayed reporting, because, up to a year, that can be an issue as well. And the extent of, if you look at, some of the research which came from Europe recently, the last year report, that, the workplace incidents, the underreporting rates between, they looked at 2019 to 2021 data, they varied widely by country from almost less than 10% to almost nearly 100% in terms of, underreporting in the Europe. And of course, you have regulatory findings. You have OSHA inspectors. They identify these employer programs discouraging reportings. So you have so many issues. There is a study which highlighted the medical management practices in on-site medical units. So all these issues can be an important factor. So the other one is the special population. If you go into the third one, which is, you're looking at inclusive workplace, some encourage employee voice, while, some exclusive environments, they suppress that as well. And there are studies which show that, Blacks and Hispanics, their workers report they were most at, unease about reporting the unsafe work conditions, including the risks for MSDs, and the fear and economic pressure. Some workers might think that, there may be a potential job loss, and, and intimidation from employers, and also co-workers can be an issue as well. Uh, a classic one, stigma around pain and injury. That's a factor too, based on the studies which are reported, and there is a gender differences in terms of reporting. It seems in the veteran study, the women more likely to report moderate severe pain, but men might not report pain at all, and young workers as well, So, so there are many reasons with respect to, a special population as well. So coming to undercounting. So what is undercounting is that basically incomplete or inaccurate representation of actual workplace injuries. That leads to a discrepancy between the reality and the recorded data. Okay. So it can be, failure to capture occupational illnesses with the long latency periods that can be, result in undercounting. Exclusion of certain work groups. That public sector employees, self-employed, and small farm workers, that can be one of the factors too when you're looking at the data. Were they included or not? Maybe that's the reason you have this undercounted, and some of the workers' compensation data is not being included, so those factors too. And what are the factors, if you look at, again, contributing to undercounting is willful underreporting by employees and employers. Again, that can be a factor too. Case types, some data systems have a different way to look at these definitions. So the case definitions do matter as well, so again, each one have their own way of looking at the data. So that's what we try to address in this particular report, And the last one is basically workers' comp, filing the trends. Despite we have this no-fault insurance covering the wage replacement and the medical care, most workers do not file the claims. And there was a study in 2000 which looked into only 25% of workers with, work-related MSDs filed for workers' comp, And so they kind of looked at it and they said, what are the strongest predictors for this particular filing? Severity of the condition, longer job tenures, lower annual income, and in fact, dissatisfaction with the coworkers. And also challenging, with respect to regulations, because a lot of people don't understand, the regulations with respect to workers' comp. The employer has to be aware too, not only the employee, but employers, because so that they can educate the workers, and also a lot of, again, the employer medical management practices, so you see that, there is an issue with the, employer that can affect the injury records and workplace safety. And also ensure quality care for workers and workplace safety improvements that can be, can be impacted as well. So these are the important factors which we are the barriers for the, if you're, looking at the injury reports. But the, one of the ways, thanks to Brent, when we are looking at this, when we are working on this report, basically talked about early intervention program, so well, why is it important? Because early reporting, if you report early, at least we can have some strategies with respect to early intervention. There are not many studies per se, other than, research studies, and there are obviously some solution provider studies. So, but yes, early intervention does matter, so that's, I hope Brent can touch base on that too. So, because that's a very important aspect of injury reporting and also injury mitigations. So the last slide, which is talking about surveillance, because as I said, I'm just covering fast so that we can get to the actual panel discussion. we know what's the classic definition of surveillance is. It refers to continuous and systematic gathering, analysis and interpretation and sharing of this information related to MSDs and hazards. Okay, so an efficient injury surveillance system, collects all the injury events and the near misses. But we can do that by establishing a process for not only identifying the risks for injuries, documenting the causal factors, the risks, and reporting the incidents that lead to injuries, and classifying that collected data in a meaningful way so that plant A, plant B can be same, rather than just every plant has its own, just an example, and analyzing that particular data to understand the root causes and injury trends, and the investigating and implementing risk reduction effort. These are all part of the efficient injury surveillance system. So in our report, we proposed a smart workplace injury surveillance system. Smart, again, looking at the way AI and, Internet of Things have been became so entrenched in our lives now. So we thought, okay, one of the barriers is definitely, if you look at the injury reporting is, we looked at the under reporting, under counting, all that can be eliminated or at least can be minimized by looking at these smart technologies. So again, it's just a conceptual, a hypothetical system we proposed in this, but instead of going into every box, I'm just going to focus on a few things. That is, say, for example, if a worker is, we put the wearable sensors, and then you're collecting the data, but and then you're not only that helps in terms of not the worker's data, what the task data, and what is the work environment data we can collect in real time, but also it can be used for risk assessments, proactive and active. Proactive approach in terms of what is happening, and then you can have this predictive analytics, and also, and then it can be integrated to the workplace system integration. We talk about OHS management system, the ISO 45001, where they talk about the importance of having a efficient OHS management system. We can integrate with respect to all the data, whatever we have been collected, either through incident reports or this emerging tech, you can use a proper standard coding mechanisms. NIOSH has proposed. NIOSH uses machine learning, and also BLS now uses machine learning in terms of the collecting data and the coding. Coding the data, so that it can be fed into whatever the system you're using. Because each organization has its own approach in terms of collecting data. So we are not proposing a system, but whatever the system you're using, if that particular system has these facility, these attributes, then you can collect data in real time, and you can have this opportunity. You have a continuous improvement. Okay, and then you can this particular data can be used by your supervisors or AHS manager or ergonomist, trying to develop not only the real-time reports, but all the alerts, for high-risk workers, for the high-risk factors, and then you can develop some ergonomics interventions. So that's how we kind of looked into this smart workplace injury surveillance system. I agree that not every industry has emerging technologies, but even if you use a paper and pencil, collecting the data and reporting that particular data through a spreadsheet, we can streamline the process so that you can develop a simple injury surveillance system. Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is trying to address the workplace risk factors and developing interventions. So and that's all from my side. And then, we'll go into the panel right now. So Katie, it's to you.
Thanks, Ram. I think we're going to have Riley share the introduction slide for our panelist here. So thanks again, Ram, for sharing that information with us. I think your presentation set us up really nicely for this next piece of the program. Before jumping into our moderated panel discussion, let me introduce our panelists for today, and they have joined the screen here. Christine Cohn is a senior manager of the Ergonomics and Industrial Athlete Program at Pacific Gas and Electric Company, also known as PG&E, where she has worked for the last 3 years. Christine has 20 years of experience developing and managing corporate ergonomics programs for small businesses and national and international Fortune 500 companies across many industry sectors. She holds a master's degree in health ergonomics from the University of Derby and is a certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. She also has a certification as a professional ergonomist, and she's a member of the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society. Thanks for joining us, Christine. Frank, who is with TNO, he's on our slide there in the middle. There may have been some miscommunication about the time change and time zones. He is in Europe, so you'll notice he's not with us over here on the right. Apologize for that. But we also have Brent Bowers here with us. He is the ergonomics program manager for John Deere. He has responsibility for developing standards, guidelines, and training materials to aid engineers and safety professionals in applying ergonomics principles in product, equipment, and workstation design. He received a BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Idaho and an MS in safety and ergonomics from the University of Utah as a NIOSH fellowship recipient. Brent is also has been working for more than 25 years in the semiconductor, automotive, and heavy equipment manufacturing industries in a variety of roles. He is also a member of the National Safety Council MSD Solutions Lab Advisory Council. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Ram kick us off here. And as we go through the panel discussion, I encourage you as attendees to put whatever questions you have for our panelists today in the Q&A, and we'll hopefully get to some of those in a little bit.
Thanks, Katie. Christine, just tell us about your company and your ergonomics program and how, what are the unique attributes of your program?
Yes, thank you, Ram. Good afternoon, everyone. Pacific Gas and Electric, or PG&E, is one of the nation's largest combined gas and utility companies. We serve nearly 2/3 of the state of California, so a wide range, a variety, everything from the mountains to the beaches, the plains, the valleys, and the big metropolis areas. So it makes it very challenging. Working with one worker up in the mountains, they might do the same job down on the beach, but the ergonomic risk factors look very different. Our program is made up of 4 main components. We have our office ergonomics program that serves our office and hybrid worker population with ergonomics education, ergonomic evaluations, ergo self-assessments, and lots of educational resources. Then for our industrial workforce, we have our industrial athlete program, which are our athletic trainers that work with individuals both in a group setting and one-on-one to provide body mechanics coaching, give health and musculoskeletal health education, as well as any tips and ideas, suggestions, care for first aid level support if people are experiencing discomfort. We also have our industrial ergonomics team, which is out there assessing risks for tasks and working with our various departments to determine solutions to help reduce ergonomics risk. And our vehicle ergonomics program, which provides vehicle education as well as ergo evaluations. And we partner closely with our fleet engineering to do design reviews of vehicles in our fleet.
Wow, that's pretty good. I think that you're covering all the bases. So Brent, please go ahead with the ergonomics program you have at John Deere.
Sure, yeah. So we've been focusing on ergonomics for now going on about 40 years. So it was really in the mid 80s that we started talking about some of these musculoskeletal disorders and how we can address that. So it kind of became a topic in safety, but we've always had a high level of engagement with our engineers as well, just recognizing that safety gets to see the outcomes to it after a person has been injured. But fundamentally, it really comes down to the design of, as mentioned in the bio, the products that we build, the processes that we use, the workstation and tools. Those are those designs that result in somebody being inefficient in their job and having discomfort and pain and injury. And so that's really where a lot of our focus, our vision, and ergonomics programs are really geared around more of the engineering elements of it, trying to make sure that we have programs in place at every one of our factories. We've got an assigned ergonomics process owner. We also have an ergonomics program that we audit against at each unit just to make sure that they are addressing these ergonomics concerns. As part of this, we've also got a foundation that's really built around the ergonomic standards. And so we have, some companies have their own internal engineering standards. Well, we have ergonomic standards that are also applicable, no different than we would, say, looking at the strength of a particular fastener. We look at ergonomics programs the same way with standards and guidelines. We also like to do training, making sure that our engineers and our operators and our supervisors and our leadership all understand what ergonomics is, what it does, and how they are involved in that process. One of the things that we've tried to do over the last few years is focus on training to what we refer to as our 6-2s. That's work that's done too high or too low or too far away from a person, too much in terms of force, too many in terms of repetition, and too long for static, awkward postures and contact stress. And so by focusing on those 6-2s, now we've got a common language between the engineers, the operators, and the supervisors. So when somebody says, hey, I've got a problem with this job and it's too high for me, everybody already has that framework and understanding of what that means. One of the other successful elements that we have included in our ergonomics program is something that we refer to as Ergo Days events. So basically, engineers get to trade places for a day with the operators out on the factory floor. And very quickly, they realize the inefficiencies or the errors of their designs, and it helps them from an experiential base know what they need to change in future designs. One of the things that we've also incorporated in the last few years is really focusing on metrics to help us understand the extent of ergonomics issues. And so with that, we look very closely at, say, the percent of recordable injuries that are ergonomic in nature, but then also going beyond that. Just instead of looking at the overall injury rates and case counts, we dig a little bit further into how many, say, what percent of our lost time injuries are ergonomic in nature, which typically you're going to see a much higher rate of lost time cases that are ergonomic in nature than you would recordables. But also looking at our workers' compensation spend, at least in North America, we've got a pretty good handle on that being self-insured. And we recognize that about 60% of our workers' compensation cost is to those ergonomic injuries. And so by having a good evaluation of that data, it helps drive better business decisions. Like Christine mentioned, early reporting and interventions become very important. I'm thinking it's got to be better part of 20 years ago, I started looking into Boeing's industrial athlete program and trying to understand, how can we utilize this as part of an ergonomics strategy and an ergonomics program? And so part of this goes well beyond the just looking at injuries and that injury management or case management aspect, but we also use early intervention programs and use those intervention specialists to proactively go out into the factories, to interface with the operators in the factory floor, to have discussions about work methods and provide coaching. They help to develop and lead some of our daily dynamic warm-up and stretching programs. And then they can also provide conservative treatment where it's appropriate. We don't want to circumvent the occupational health process, so they become an integral part of that occupational health process, just really treating issues as they're at that level of discomfort before it can kind of devolve into the pain and injury and disability. So if we can treat those minor musculoskeletal discomfort issues early on, we see a much better result on the back end.
Amazing. Thank you, Brent. I mean, I think one lucky thing is that, both of your organizations have a pretty, a solid programs, in terms of addressing the MSDs and injuries. That's actually a good news. Not, I mean, still, I think, as you know, a lot of industries still struggle with it. So I'm just glad that, you guys are in a good shape. So just Christine, just going back to, as you know, the topic was about injuries, what is the, maybe, industry A might have a different definition of ergonomics, MSD related versus MSD related injury. So how, in your view, just how can organizations develop these consistent definitions for these ergonomics related injuries or MSDs across the workforce? What are the typical definitions you use in your industry so that, it can be, maybe we can learn from you. So versus, and the same question to Brent as well. So just if you can, just talk about the definitions you use, to address this.
Well, some years ago here at PG&E, we actually developed what we call our Ergo flag. It's easy to look at all the MSDs and immediately assume they're all ergo related and then jump into action when you don't really understand the problem. And so, we had a cross-functional group of people on the ergonomics team, our injury management team, our work comp team, as well as our data and analytics folks join a committee to help come up with our ergo flag. And so we really define those ergonomic related injuries as things that are attributed to ergonomic risk factors, awkward postures, force, repetition, contact stress, those sorts of things, vibration, also big in our industry. And so we're really looking at, okay, what are the ergo risks associated that? What was the work task that was involved? What was the source of that injury? And we're using that information to tag our injuries with an ergo flag. That's done at the initial incident report. And it's not always perfect. We don't always have enough information at that point in time to solidly determine that ergo flag, but I think it gets us a good start. From there, we do an internal review to see if there's any that obviously we need to change. Every now and then we'll see something that's more of a sudden jerk or movement. We'll see things like, oh, someone moved their arm out of the way to avoid a spider that they came across while they were out in the field doing work or something along those lines. And those are not ergonomic related injuries. So, making sure that flag is accurate. We also use our injury investigation process to consider what are the factors that led up to the injury? Sometimes the moment of injury, it isn't clear whether it's ergonomic or not. And so it's important to understand what led up to it, what the job involves. And so we use those injury investigations as well to help validate our ergonomics flag. We use the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, otherwise known as NERC, cause codes. And one of the cause codes there is ergonomics. However, ergonomics could mean anything, right? And so, what ergonomics was involved. And so we tag all of our injuries, not only with an ergo flag, but then we look at the details and what was the risk factor that was involved? What was the cause as far as we can tell? Was it related to overuse? Was it related to excessive force, lifting that 100-pound box by yourself? What was the cause, right? And so we have those titled, we have consistent titles that we can then use for reporting to help us see where are these injuries occurring? What are the types of injuries that are happening? Are there tenures? Are there age ranges? What's happening with where our injuries are occurring so that we can get our resources out where they're needed.
So you have an automated collecting of the data, or is it like a where this? I mean, it's system. I mean, it's easy to input all the injury, risk factors and all that. Is more of a systemic approach, or rather than just a simple spreadsheet approach? Or just curious how you do it.
Yeah, At this point, there's a few different systems. We're hoping to get everything pulled together. And I think that's where having consistency in the people and making sure that everyone involved is trained, which has been a key part of my role over the last 3 years, is making sure that our teams really understand what an ergonomic injury is. When I first came in, there were a lot of injuries marked ergo that I was like, I don't think so. As an ergonomist, I don't know that I could sign off on that. There's no ergo risk factor present. There's no solution that would reduce risk that would help to alleviate that injury. And so we've done a lot of training with our groups to help ensure that consistency across the board.
Thank you, Christine. Brent, well, this is, I mean, it's the same question to you, but I just want to, one thing I want to give credit to Brent is that, when we started looking at, MSD definitions and the ergonomics and all, actually was one of the first ones who kind of, you know, um, we need to think outside the box rather than just a strict definitions and how. So credit to you, Brent, we started looking at this injury relevance, the insights paper. So that's all it started, I should say, so, to you, speaking to people like Christine and even Dave from Cargill, all of you actually made us to think, okay, there is some, issue we need to address. So please go ahead with your, insights as well.
Oh, thank you for those kind words, Rom. I guess really when it comes to how we defined ergonomic injuries or musculoskeletal disorders, about 10 years ago, we were kind of in where Christine is at with the ergo flag. So in our incident management system, we set up a checkbox, and if it was an ergonomic case, we'd have people make sure to check the box. However, we found that it was very inconsistent, I think much like Christine found. So what we have done since is actually shifted over more to an automated selection. So based on the nature of injury and the accident type or the incident type, much as you showed in the report, by triggering on those specific flags and combinations of those flags, then the system basically tells us it was either an MSD or not an MSD. So, for example, if I have somebody that reports an acute strain or sprain, and we go back and look at the accident or the nature of injury being something related to repetitive motion or an awkward posture, then we would flag those as an ergonomic case or an MSD case. There may be others, though, that we would not consider to be an MSD case. Say if a person happened to be, they report an acute strain sprain and it's related to a part that was falling out of a fixture, that no longer would be classified as an ergonomic case. And so we do have some of those distinctions. And it's, as I mentioned, that combination of both the nature of injury and the incident type. Now, for the most part, there's a couple of places you can look for that type of information. Of course, the report that you just shared does go into some of that information. If you want more detail on it, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has an occupational and injury illness classification manual. And if you go into that manual, it's got certain categories that categories of injuries such as musculoskeletal system and connective tissue diseases and disorders. You can get into some of the drill down details of soft tissue disorders. You can also get into the secondary source of injury, which may be categories such as overexertion or bodily reactions or repetitive motion. And so you can really drill into the details with the BLS classification manual. But we've tried to keep it simple and just stick with about 8 criteria for the nature of injury and about 6 criteria for the accident type. And beyond that, there are some that are going to slip through the cracks one way or the other. But for the most part, this gives us a good enough understanding of where some of our problems are to really drive more proactive behaviors.
Thank you, Brent. Yeah, that's a very good information. I'm glad you mentioned about your incident management system as well. So that's actually one of the good ways to get the data and make it more powerful in terms of mitigating the injuries. So just for both of you, the same question. I talked about these potential barriers, right, in terms of record keeping. I was wondering whether you in your organizations also experience the same. That is, what are the potential barriers in terms of proper record keeping, of these? And Christine, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, sure. I think that one of the challenges I found, not just at PG&E, but in my career as an ergonomist, working with a lot of different organizations, is that MSDs are not a clear-cut call all the time. I like to think of, there's the acute MSD, I call them Rice Krispies. There's the snap, crackle, or pop, right? So an employee knows that, hey, something happened, I'm injured. But it's those ones that, are cumulative, that build over time, employees may not always recognize. And we talk about the importance of early reporting, but do we talk about what early reporting means in terms of MSDs? It's not a cut on your hand you can see. So how do we educate workers, to understand early signs and symptoms, so that they report? I can't tell you the number of people I've worked with in my career that have waited until, there was redness, swelling, numbness, tingling. It not only affected their work life, but activities of daily living as well. And if they'd only reported sooner and earlier, or, not been afraid to speak up, that would have helped. A lot of folks, you'll hear things like, oh, I just thought I overdid it at the gym, or, those sorts of things. They don't recognize these signs and symptoms. And so several companies I've worked with have done different things to get that kind of information out there. We use a stoplight here. But other organizations, I've seen temperature gauges, I've seen pyramids, but, sort of helping to educate what are the early signs and symptoms and what do you do? And then what are the little more concerning, and then what are the severe symptoms? And just trying to educate both our workers and leaders on what they need to do and when. I think another barrier that I've seen, especially in large organizations, is just knowing how to report. Is it prominent? It's information that you're given, but you don't need it until you need it. And so it's easy to forget. So how are you promoting that early reporting, in a large organization where people are spread out like we are here at PG&E? So making sure that people understand the process and know who to call and what to do, I think, is another issue that I've seen pretty frequently.
Thank you, Christine. Brent, you want to go with that too?
I think a few barriers that we run into from time to time, some of our smaller factories don't have on-site occupational health. And so a person may start to experience some of these, the signs and symptoms of an ergonomic issue, and they go to their personal health care provider. And so we don't maybe have the real good lines of communication for us to really understand the true nature of the injury or the extent of that injury until it's way too late. And so that really, I think, is one of the barriers that kind of keeps us from being able to analyze this well. One of the other barriers that I see potentially is sometimes we challenge the work relationship of a reported incident or issue. Christine kind of mentioned the idea of the insidious onset of or insidious nature of ergonomics, that it kind of just slowly creeps up until finally a person gets to the point where I really can't do this anymore. That really makes it difficult for us to understand, is this work related or is it not work related? And so trying to really ferret some of that out really takes a professional opinion. We have to, as an ergonomist, I have to understand or be able to say, here are the risk factors in that job, and here's the relationship to the type of injury that the person is reporting. It's not always obvious to some people. I think one of the other challenges that we have, Ram, is that there are sometimes personal risk factors come into play with this, and so that's where issues such as obesity, smoking, even gender from a hormone perspective can lead, or they won't lead to the injury, but it can it can make those symptoms worse in some cases. And so trying to ferret out and really filter through some of that information becomes in part very difficult, and I think does become a barrier to proper reporting of some ergonomic incidents.
Thank you, Brent. So just, I want to take one question from the audience here. It says, are you using occupational medicine and nurse resources for determining if any type of MSD is related to work performed by the employee? So are you using any OCMED or a nurse resources? If this
I would
is
say absolutely yes in those cases, Ram. So most of our larger facilities, well, actually all of our larger facilities have an on-site either an occupational health nurse or in some cases, an occupational doctor that's in the facility. Absolutely, we rely heavily on their professional opinion about whether or not there is a work relation component to those injuries. And they are a part of our overall MSD management process, is making sure that we keep them very heavily engaged.
Thank you. Just, along the line, so I think you kind of mentioned about your employee participation and all. So I was just curious, what are the strategies, for, in terms of encouraging employee participation and engagement, in this particular injury reporting, I know you kind of touched on it, but just wondering how the employee engagement works in terms of reporting and the surveillance efforts. Go ahead, Brent, and next, Christine.
All right. Yeah. So I think as part of that, training becomes the most important element to that, just so that people understand what these MSDs are and the need for early reporting, and just so that we have that level of engagement. Quite often, as well, as we engage with those employees and as we're taking, I'll call it an incident report, and starting to look at potential corrective actions, they have some really good ideas. They are the experts on the job. So how do we use that information from the operator to maybe make some changes that they need? In some cases, it may be just something as simple as needing a different tool, or this impact gun that they've been using for years is finally worn out and we just need to replace it. So sometimes it becomes very easy for us to fix some of those concerns. But they have to raise their voice, and they have to be, and we really try to encourage that with the operator reporting those signs and symptoms early and working with their supervisor to report them. In some cases, the supervisor may just say, hey, you really need to go visit occupational health. In other cases, we may engage the supervisor to get the early intervention specialists involved in some cases.
I like your approach or your organization's approach of engineer taking over the frontline worker job in a way, just to understand the gravity of what the worker is going through. That's really great. I still like that approach. We just saw Frank. Frank, so good to see you, my friend. Go. I apologize. We had a what do you call time change in the last week, so I think that kind of. So Frank, just if you don't mind, introduce yourself and tell about your company and you have any internal ergonomics program, and give a European perspective, please. In 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes, I'll do my best. I'm really sorry about that.
No worries.
Our department in TNO has a role similar to NSC and a bit like NIOSH. So for the Dutch government, we create easy access tools to assess occupational risks for companies, especially for small and medium enterprises. So that's what our role is. But TNO in itself is a company. We have 4,500 researchers. And so we have our own prevention program. And first of all, we have prevention assistants that's required by law. These are occupational safety and health assistants, and they're the first point of contact. And for MSDs, I trained them together with a colleague of mine. But they can call us in for help as well. So that's the first part of the prevention program. The second part is we have state-of-the-art furniture. Our employees have a very high control over their own work. And when it comes to registering MSDs, we don't do that ourselves. This is done by an occupational health service. So basically, you first have to see them, and that only happens when you have sick leave, and otherwise you wouldn't see them at all. So we might miss a lot of MSDs, but I don't think we have a lot of MSDs. And that's also because for us, it's very easy to seek treatment. That's no problem at all. It's also not riskful to seek treatment. So I think in our company, the psychosocial risk factors, stress, are higher than the MSD risk factors.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm so glad to see you,
I'm
you
so
know,
sorry. I wish I could have come from the beginning. That's, yeah, but
no, no worries, I think we have one question I'm going to take from the audience, and then, we'll move to, I'll give it to Katie. One is, uh, interesting. How are you classifying MSD injuries compared to other risk categories? Like, slip, trips, and falls, machine safety, electrical. Are you classifying MSD injuries at one level or defining more specifically, such as lift, lowering, repetitions? So, I think a point is ergonomics injuries are currently our number one cause of injury there in their organization, possibly because all ergo risk factors fit into one bucket. So any insights from all of you?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead,
go ahead,
Kristen.
Frank.
Well, we don't. First of all, we don't call it ergonomic risks.
Yeah.
Because in Europe we don't use ergonomic in the same sense as musculoskeletal. But the occupational doctors, they register these MSDs so that we can act on them. But otherwise, I'm not sure we have strong categorization. We have accidents, of course, and they're categorized, but I don't deal with that. And with respect to MSDs, from an ergonomics point of view, I don't really care what kind of injury you have. I care whether it's work related or not, and what the cause is. That's what we try to tackle. And if it's an MSD or something, like you sprain your ankle, but which is something from your bones, so you could see it as an MSD, but because it was caused maybe by an injury, you wouldn't categorize it as an MSD. But then if it was caused because of the work incentivizing you to always jump out of something, then I would call it something that has an ergonomic cause, because the work isn't arranged properly. So you would be incentivized to behave in a wrong way, which might lead to this injury. So that's in short.
Thank you, Frank. Christian, lost,
Yeah, I think, I mentioned that we have our ergo flag, but we also have, we title each of our injury types so that we know what was the cause. Was it a lift lower? Was it a push pull? What was the motion involved? What was the ergonomics risk factor involved? That helps us then understand where we need to focus our energies and efforts. Lift, push, pull, probably the top three there. And so our team has done a lot of educational campaigns tailored for specific groups for the types of lift, push, pull activities they do, where we have small group training sessions, have people coming in and talking about what are you lifting today? And how are we going to approach it? And can we use a mechanical aid? And so we use those labels to really help drive our intervention process.
Thank you. I think we're almost time. So, Katie, it's up. You want to go ahead and take care of the rest, please? Sorry, it's trying to take care of all that.
No worries. Yeah. Thank you to our panelists for sharing your experiences and knowledge. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Especially Frank sneaking in there in the end. Again, time change is a funny thing. So
Yeah.
Also, thanks, Rom, for moderating such a great discussion. So before we wrap up today, I just wanted to share a bit of information with you all. The MSD Solutions Lab recently released new resources related to this topic that we discussed today. Rom covered some of the key takeaways during his presentation earlier. We're going to have my colleague Riley drop the links to both of these resources, the white paper and the infographic, in the chat for you all to click on, and you can access those. You can also find our complete library of resources, from case studies to spotlights, white papers, reports, and more on our resources page. Riley's also going to drop that link there in the chat. Looking forward, just a few upcoming resources and opportunities we wanted to call out. We will be releasing our 2023-2024 pilot grant and research to solutions grant reports in late May. These reports will highlight key takeaways, successes, and lessons learned from our inaugural grant recipients. These are expected to be ready in late May. The lab is also still accepting applications through March 21st for our 2025-2026 pilot grant program. This provides MSD Pledge members an opportunity to partner with solution providers to pilot emerging tech for MSD risk mitigation. We will once again be awarding up to $20,000 per project. Riley's going to drop a link in the chat if you're interested in learning more and accessing that application. Lastly, we encourage you to join us in Charlotte, North Carolina on April 22nd through the 25th for the 2025 NST Spring Safety Conference and Expo. Dr. Paige DeBalo with the MSD Solutions Lab will be there co-presenting on program implementation and technology readiness for reducing injuries in small businesses. And then next slide there, it's through the collective effort of all of us that will be one step closer to achieving our vision of a world where all workplaces are free from MSDs and workers can live their fullest lives. And to those of you that have already signed the MSD Solutions Pledge, we thank you for joining us on this journey to transform workplace safety. We are proud to continue our work together. Before we end for the day, we have a poll for you all. Your input helps us to improve, so please take a moment to respond to a few survey questions about this event and provide some topic suggestions for future resources or events if you have any ideas. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, as you guys are all clicking through the poll, just a final thank you again for attending today's town hall. Don't hesitate to reach out to the team if you have any questions. And as always, be safe.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Brent.
Thanks, everybody.
Christine. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. All right.
Have a terrific Tuesday.
See you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Frank.
Sorry too. I
No.
wish I could join earlier.
Thank you.